Good evening and welcome to this special broadcast. Our big focus today, US sanctions on Iran are back and India finds itself in a tricky situation. We told you yesterday that US President Donald Trump has issued a stern warning to countries that trade with Iran. He has said that anyone doing business with Iran will not do business with the United States. India does business with both. So what is likely impact the sanctions will have on India? For one, Iran is the third largest source of crude oil for India. India's imports from Iran in 2017-2018, which are dominated by petroleum, were valued at $11.11 billion, while exports were worth just over $2 billion and comprised mainly of rice and tea. India has sought an exemption on these from the US government, but hopes of a waiver look slim at the moment. To add to that, India has pledged investment of $500 million in Iran's Chabahar port, which is a very crucial and strategic trade route for India, Iran and Afghanistan. To discuss this and take this further and understand the implications for India, we're now joined by former Oil Secretary Saurabh Chandra, who's also headed the Department of Industrial Policy Promotion in the Ministry of Commerce. We also have former Indian Ambassador to the United States, Meera, Shankar, and former Indian Envoy to Iran, DP Srivastava. Mr. Srivastava, if I can come to you first. The State Department, after these sanctions came into effect, said that in the next 90 days, we will see increasing economic pressure to deny the Iranian region financial resources it needs to finance terror, its nuclear missile program, and its dangerous activities in the Middle East. On one hand, they say these sanctions are not aimed at the Iranian people. On the other, look at what's happening to the Iranian economy. It is already on a downward spiral. What exactly is Donald Trump's game plan here?
Well, I can only speak from the Indian perspective. I can't speak for the US administration. And India has never supplied anything involving dual-use technology to Iran. We do stand by our commitment to our historical relations with that country. And we have expressed our views that the nuclear deal, which was agreed by all sides, should be respected.
Ambassador Meera, Shankar, if I can get you in at this point. On one hand, Donald Trump says that these sanctions are going to be the most biting ever. And on the other hand, we hear the Trump administration saying that Trump is ready to speak to Rouhani at the right moment when we can sign a real comprehensive deal. What is the Trump administration signaling to? What do they really want? Is this quintessential Donald Trump? How should India see this?
I think going by what the US administration has said and by what Donald Trump has said, there seem to be, 2 or 3 objectives that the US has. One is to get Iran to change its behavior in the region. Now, when the Obama administration was having talks with Iran, along with the others, the Europe, China, Russia, they did want to bring Iran's regional behavior into the talks, and it was discussed. But finally, it was very difficult to reach consensus on it. And they felt that the nuclear deal was important enough in itself to not combine it with the others or make it conditional on an agreement on the rest. So the nuclear deal was finalized. Now, President Trump says that Iran must stop its export of terrorism, its support to, its destabilizing policies in the region, and that he also wants the nuclear deal to be more effective. So I think there are 1 or 2 things which they've talked of. One is that it comes to an end after a certain point of time, and then Iran would be free to do what it wants, or nobody knows what the follow-on would be. Then it doesn't cover Iran's missile program. So there are 2 or 3 objectives that the US administration has. Of course, the US is virtually alone amongst the great powers on this issue, because Europe has said that it stands by the deal, and Russia and China have said that they stand by the deal, and have all three have been critical in terms of the US decision.
Right, and I'll get in Mr. Saurabh Chandra at this point, because Mr. Chandra, the US has been saying that there is no provision for a waiver, but yes, we could look at specific requests from certain countries. Now, the embargo on oil will come into place from the 4th of November. How is this likely to affect India?
Now, in my opinion, India should actually be worried about three things, which in the order of priority would be oil prices. Number two would be the Chabahar port. And the third would be our upstream investments in fields like Farzad B. Now, oil prices are going to hit us because what this sanction essentially means is it creates uncertainty. Now, when there is uncertainty, speculators move in, and this means that oil prices will only go up in one direction, that is northwards. So we have to be very worried about it, and it wouldn't be a bad idea, one, join hands with China and look for sanctions. Oil has a global price. If prices go up, consumers in US would also be affected, and they have elections to the House of Representatives sometimes in November. So that is one. Two, Chabahar port is of strategic importance. It's an opening into Central Asia, and I think USA also recognizes the importance of the Chabahar port. So we'll have to join hands with China to work for some kind of waivers. And
all right, we'll have to work with China, because Donald Trump, Mr. Chandra, is talking about a global coalition. He's talking about a global coalition, but you raised a very important point. Will countries like Russia, China, India all come on board? Ambassador Meera Shankar, I'd like to ask you about the possibility of a waiver. We've been talking about this for a while now. I think on the 6th of September, when the 2+2 takes place, we'll be talking about the impact of Iranian sanctions on India. Do you think the way the current administration is progressing, the tone and tenor of the conversation coming from the State Department, do you think a waiver vis-a-vis India is possible at this stage?
Well, I think it will be difficult, but those secondary sanctions that the US has announced kick in November. They don't kick in right now. Much will also depend on the results of the congressional elections that they are going to have. Will the Republicans hold the House of Representatives, or will they, will the Democrats gain an edge? Secondly, much will also depend on how Europe actually behaves. Russia doesn't really import much oil from Iran, but it does supply weapon systems. It has supplied other technologies to Iran. And China is the largest importer, but it deals in yuan. And Iran imports a huge amount of goods from China against those yuan. India has tried some rupee trading arrangements with Iran in the past, but the problem is that Iran imports very little from India, and then it accumulates a whole heap of rupee reserves. So now Europe has invoked the, they have invoked an ordinance which says that the blocking ordinance, if you will, which blocks the impact of the US law on Europe. The problem is that for many companies, even though the governments say this, for many companies, they don't want to risk their business in the United States. So Total, for instance, has pulled out, or now in one of the German car companies. But a lot is going to depend on what stance Europe, Russia, and China take with regard to this. Now, the Chinese apparently have said that they will not increase their oil purchases from Iran, but they will continue what they are doing.
Okay. I'll get Ambassador Srivastava at this stage. Ambassador Srivastava, the rupee real mechanism was used last time around when the sanctions had kicked in during the Obama administration. How successful do you think this mechanism would be this time around? And how much can India really persist with trade with Iran if a waiver doesn't come through in the next couple of months? A couple of weeks, in fact.
You know, two things. Rupee real mechanism, which was worked out last time, it kept the oil exports going for Iran, and that's something which was an existential issue for them. It also helped boost Indian exports. And I'm not divulging any secret, if Indian exports went up from $2.2 billion to $4.9 billion over 2 years period. In dollar terms, that is 38 and 40% growth per year. Now, that is quite substantial. And at the same time, we were very careful to avoid being involved in anything which involving the dual-use technology. Now, coming back to the present round of sanctions, I think there is no escape to working out some arrangement for oil payment, because without that, Iran will have no interest in exporting crude. And for us, this arrangement will help to ensure that whatever non-sanctioned goods that Indian exporters sell to Iran, they get paid for it.
Okay. All right. Ambassador Srivastava, that's an important point that you're talking to us about. But,
and it is entire...
Yeah. Right. You know, I would also like to ask
Mr.
Saurabh Chandra about this, because we've already seen a reduction in oil import from Iran in the month of June by over 16%, and the import of oil from US has hit a record high. So do you think we've already given in to the United States? Mr. Chandra?
It'll be very difficult to resist the diktats of USA, because no Indian company would like to get out of the US financial system. We've seen it last time, and the future is going to be no different. So as a plan B, we need to get in place something which manages our imports, a demand management for oil imports, also management of our non-oil imports. We have to cut that down, and there are ways available. We just have to put this plan B into place. Otherwise, we will have a serious problem on the trade deficit. Because if 2 million barrels per day go out of the international market, I'm sure Saudi Arabia and Russia wouldn't like prices to shoot through the sky, seeing the long-term deleterious effects of oil prices going up. But nevertheless, this gap would be very difficult to plug, plus the uncertainty that it creates.
Right.
The supply-demand balance may be very delicately balanced, but still, prices may just shoot.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, we'll take a short break here, but we'll request Mr. Saurabh Chandra, Meera, Shankar and DP Srivastava to continue being with us, because when we return, we look at the real options available on the table and the impact on the strategic route of Chabahar. And what about the India-Iran relationship? Let's not forget this important relationship. What is the road ahead for that? That is something we'll take up after the break.